Use photographs. We must not stay here prisoners. We shall break the illusion. This is Maya. What? Okay. We have already started. Fast. Now the quote from the Holy Mountain. We began in a fairy tale and we came to life. But is this life reality?
No, it's another episode of the Wertow podcast. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. My name is Thomas.
And my name is Philipp. And today, as you already know probably from the thumbnail and also my inappropriate private self-talk that you had to witness, we are talking today about The Holy Mountain from the year 1973, written and directed by one of the absolute madmen of cinema, Alexandro Jodorowksy. And yes, how can I describe this film, what it is about? It's about 9 people, okay, this was not grammatically correct, I think, but human beings, I guess, to an extent. Most of them are aliens, and one is Jesus, and one is Alexandro Jodorowksy himself, playing, of course, a spiritual guru, and he is guiding those people to the top of the Holy Mountain, where they have to fight 9 immortal men who are dressed like members of the Ku Klux Klan, and they have to fight them and beat them up to gain some special knowledge and immortality, essentially. And so what we are seeing is the quest for the 9 immortal Ku Klux Klan members. Yes. Thomas, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. It's absolutely insane and very overwhelming. If you take any scene out of context, it's really difficult to explain anyone what this is even supposed to be. It's really a film that you have to have seen to be able to even imagine it. And yeah, I really liked it. There's of course a lot of social criticism in it, which again, it feels kind of overwhelming at points and kind of underwhelming at other certain points, which is really interesting, I think, because the movie does kind of shove its messages down your throat at times.
May I ask, when is this movie ever underwhelming?
I mean, if I take the example of the scene where Jesus Christ shits in a glass jar and the alchemist uses it to create gold, and then he shows it to Jesus and tells him, yes, your crap can be made into gold or whatever. It's
You forgot to mention that the alchemist is, of course, Alexandro Jodorowksy himself.
Right.
And I guess he's playing himself.
So I like the idea of the scene. I also like the execution, but I thought maybe if they took away like 1 or 2 lines that explain the concept again, even though we've just seen it and everybody knows what it's supposed to mean, it could have made for a even better scene, I think. And this is one example of a handful, I would say, throughout the movie where I was like, okay, I just saw the scene, you don't have to explain it to me again. Or I see what you're doing, don't also tell me. That's what I mean. Maybe underwhelming is the right word, but you know what I mean.
Over-explanatory,
yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, yeah.
But are there any other criticisms with this movie that you have?
I mean, it is at times confusing, which is kind of the point, I guess, and which I don't really want to criticize it because I just said that at certain points it's not symbolic or whatever enough. So, no, I think this is definitely my biggest criticism, that at times it feels a bit over-explanatory, a bit preachy, but otherwise I really, really liked it.
All right, so I absolutely adore this movie, obviously. I mean, this is my cup of tea. It's completely surreal, psychedelic, esoteric, although I despise esotericism in real life, of course, but we can come to that in the part of this podcast where I go into a mode of analysis and criticism of ideology and so on. We will enter this mode immediately, but first I have to... No. But before we do that, maybe if you have seen A Clockwork Orange or something like that, I think that's a movie that you could compare it to, because both of these movies try to challenge those insane, ambitious themes about the human condition and existentialism and all this stuff, first and foremost with visuals and with crazy visual symbolism. And both of those movies completely accelerate this part of the visuals. I mean, this is one of the most ambitious and, as you've said, overwhelming movies in the visual sense alone. And I also wanted to ask you, which one do you like more, Clockwork Orange or The Holy Mountain?
I think I prefer The Holy Mountain. I like Clockwork Orange quite a bit, but yeah, as you said, I think this truly overwhelming, insane visual style just suits me more than the style of A Clockwork Orange, even though that's already very fascinating and kind of, yeah, visually interesting and unique. But yeah, I prefer The Holy Mountain in that sense.
I think they're both equally insane, if it counts.
I don't know if I'd say equally insane. I mean, Clockwork Orange doesn't have a scene where lizards and frogs dressed up in night costumes fight on some kind of miniature constructor, and then it all starts to bleed and then explode, and everybody watches it and applauds. Like, it's Clockwork Orange isn't quite on that level of insanity, I'd say.
Well, I mean, we can argue about that, but I don't know. I don't think that there's a method with which we can determine this indefinitely. So we would have to have some kind of theory or of model to determine that, or to find an answer to that question. Whatever, maybe we should go into mode of analysis right now, because that's the one thing that I was struggling with this movie the whole time. I think it's otherwise brilliant also, as you've said, the themes, the social critique and so on. We have those alien guys, and they all get like a little introduction video where they just do horrible things, cut off the testicles of people and do other weird, insane shit like gassing kindergartens to death and so on. Like, all kinds of insanity, and it's so much fun. It's so creative. For example, one of the most evil of those alien rulers is a woman who is dressed up as a clown, and she is ideologically manipulating little children for future wars, and therefore she's using her fun clownish appearance and also toy weapons and of course comic books and superheroes. Her comic book hero is called Captain, and yes, it's of course a comic book. It's a reference to Captain America, I guess, and the ideological function of this comic book is to manipulate children into being racist, into thinking that their, I guess, planet is superior to other planets, or their country is superior to other countries and so on. So I loved all of that. And then I was especially troubled by, or puzzled by all of those esoteric and religious, pseudo-religious stuff that's in this movie, because Jodorowsky is playing this spiritual leader who is forcing those people he is guiding to the Holy Mountain to do all kinds of really insane religious stuff, you would have to call it. For example, at one point he points his finger at Jesus and says, "Oh, you are evil, we have to perform an exorcism on you," and then they cast out an evil spirit, and this evil spirit is like a disabled person without arms and legs, and then And then Alejandro Jodorowsky, the director, screams to Jesus, you have to throw this monster into the water where it drowns and so on. And then Jesus finally does the right thing and kills this disabled person. It's so funny and also quite disturbing. And again, there I really thought, like, what is this movie trying to say here? That it's a good thing if we are like fundamentalists, and it's a good thing to just have faith that you're doing the right thing, even if it seems horrible to you, and that you should abandon reason and so on. And so I was quite troubled by that. But then we come to the ending of the movie, which is also like the funniest thing, because they finally arise at the top of the holy mountain. And they already see the 9 immortal Ku Klux Klan members up there sitting on the table doing nothing. And then Alejandro Jodorowsky says to those people, all right, you have learned so much. You are now ready to conquer the holy mountain and to beat up those immortal people up there and so on. Just stay here, meditate for 3 hours, and then you can attack and I guess beat them up. And Jodorowsky himself says, but I have to go now, you are now the masters, and blah, 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 all that bullshit. And then when they attack finally, 3 hours later, they find out that all of those supposed immortal men up there are just puppets, except for one, and that is Alejandro Jodorowsky himself, who is just sitting there, waiting for them. And then Jodorowsky starts to laugh, and then we come back to the beginning of this podcast where we started with this quote where he then shows them his tongue and he's like and is laughing and so on. And then he says, all right, yes, we have started with this fairy tale of immortality and the holy mountain, but now we have arisen into real life and so on, rise there and all this stuff. But is this life reality? No, it's a film. And then he says like, zoom back camera, and the camera zooms back, and we see like the crew and everything, and the cameraman and the microphone and all that stuff. And then Jodorowsky says something like, we are just images, photographs. And then they are just like destroying this table they are sitting on, and he says, goodbye to the holy mountain, real life awaits us. And then they are going and the movie is over. And I kind of wonder, because if I'm just looking at this movie as its own unique entity, I would have to conclude that all of this esoteric and religious stuff was in a sense just a mockery, and that at the end he is critical of all of this, and he's saying like, okay, that was all a fairy tale, that was all bullshit, now don't take this seriously, go out into the real world and so on. But if I look at it from the perspective of the director Jodorowsky himself, like, he is a crazy mystic. He has made like a documentary where he is trying to cure mentally ill people with magic, and this magic contains of burying a person alive to its head, and then putting like a plastic, like some plastic structure over the head of this buried person, then laying meat over that structure, and then then he sends out like wild birds, okay, like really dangerous birds who are picking away this meat just a few centimeters away from the face of this mentally ill person. and that's supposed to cure them and so on. And he's like, I don't know, what was another method that he used? He printed out photographs of faces, then pinned them on watermelons and gave one mentally ill, I guess, or traumatized person a sledgehammer and said, okay, now kill those watermelons. That will cure you.
But the real question is, did it work?
I have no idea. I have not watched this documentary. But no matter if it, you know what, the problem here is really this one, of course. And it all boils down, as most of the time, to if it's a correlation or a causation and so on, epistemological questions. God damn it. Fuck this fucking language. Fuck you, English. Tom, what do you think of about all of this?
I mean, yeah, first of all, the ending of the film is probably my favorite part. I think it's both clever and funny, even though, of course, this whole giving the viewer a look behind the set is nothing new or anything, but it was very well used in this scene. And I also think that it truly shows that all the religious imagery and whatever is obviously mockery, as you already mentioned. And I think it's a clever choice to include that ending scene, or it was a clever choice, because a film like this would have most likely, or probably still has spawned, a lot of fanatic fans that hail this film and think it's like the highest achievement of art and almost follow it like it was a religious work or whatever. And I think it was a really funny choice to then include this last scene where the director is saying, yeah, all of this, it was just a film, don't take it seriously, please just go and live your normal life and yeah, continue on with that. So that's my sentiment on the ending of the film.
Well, I don't know if that's even really the right description of it. I mean, continue on with your normal life. I don't really think that that's implied there. I think it's implied that you should open your eyes maybe for the first time really and accept reality for what it is and don't chase some esoteric illusions all the time.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean by normal life.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, how naive you are. It's funny.
I mean, depends on your definition of normal, I guess, but yeah, what was your last point with the whole causation and correlation?
Yes, my point was, if you're saying, well, did those methods, his magic methods that he used in real life to treat people, did they really work? Okay, what do you mean by work? I mean, placebo effect works. So now, what does this mean if something works?
Yeah, placebo effect does work. It's helpful. It's a helpful effect in curing slight illnesses.
Yes, sure, but then you cannot say that it worked because
I mean,
he has buried someone and
yeah.
so on. That's why I meant it's like a question of the epistemology. Holy shit, I cannot really use those kinds of words. So I have not slept well. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I know what you mean. And my question, if those methods worked, was not actually a serious question. I mean, there's obviously no way of us telling, and it's most likely just random bullshit he tried and probably did more harm than good. But yeah, again, I haven't seen the documentary either, so.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? He also is like a tarot guru. I don't even know how to call it, but he laid the tarot cards for the famous writer and director Nicholas Winding Refn, who has directed Drive and Only God Forgives and The Neon Demon and Bronson and so on. He's quite famous and well known. And he also laid the cards for the wife of this director, and then the wife had like a struggle in their relationships and so on, and then she asked Jodorowsky, so I don't know, will this trouble in our relationship ever go away, or what should I do? And Jodorowsky just said, no, they will not go away, just divorce. The cards have spoken and so on. So that's quite funny. And also, what I have to say, I have to give Jodorowsky credit again. I really love him, and I think that you're right, that The Holy Mountain obviously is a mockery of all these esoteric ideas, and that Jodorowsky himself is just not as smart as his good movies. The Holy Mountain is more intelligent than Jodorowsky as a person, and that's the case most of the time if we are talking about great art. The most prominent example is of course the musician and composer Richard Wagner, who was like a infamous anti-Semite and so on, but his operas contain themes of inclusivity and all of this kind of shit. I mean, it's a quite famous case, I think, and I think it's the same phenomenon that we have here with Jodorowsky and his movies, but Jodorowsky was actually planning to shoot the actually most insane and crazy movie definitively of all time when he tried to shoot directly after The Holy Mountain, Dune.
Yeah, I want to talk about this as well.
And there's like a documentary about it, how he tried to make Dune. Have you seen this documentary?
I haven't seen the documentary, but I know the story, and even what I heard sounds fucking great. So Dune is this pretty famous sci-fi novel, right? It came out, I think, in the 60s or maybe 70s, I don't know. I think it was in the 60s or whatever. And it has been made into films now 2 times already, I think.
And also by great directors David Lynch and Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, right. And but
whoever Denis Villeneuve is quite an important director.
Yeah, I just didn't know the name. I want to say whoever directed the new one because I didn't know. But yeah, Jodorowsky wanted to make such an insane version out of this movie. He wanted to cast, I think, Salvador Dali as well as Orson Welles and Mick Jagger to play like the leading characters, which is already absolutely genius. And he also got the people who would go on to design the sets for Alien, for example.
HR Giga.
Yeah, and also a couple other people, I think, who also worked on Alien.
Yes.
To design all the ships and worlds and whatever. Yeah.
Yes, and I have seen the designs, and it looks fucking insane.
Really cool.
It looks like gigantic heads. He wanted to have like a space station that looks like naked people with like a tank going out there, and he's explaining this like the tank goes out, and then the spaceship can land there. It's so insane. And yes, and Salvador Dali wanted to get paid like $1,000 a minute, every minute that he's on set. And he also wanted a helicopter and the burning giraffe for his payment.
I gotta say, Salvador Dali and Alexandro Jodorowsky are like a match made in heaven.
Yes, apparently they didn't even like each other that much when they first met, and Dali posed like a kind of a trick, like a question that Jodorowsky had to answer correctly. And Dali said to Jodorowsky, you know, back then in Paris and so on, I used to wander around with Picasso and so on. And from time to time, we found some clocks in the sun. Have you ever found a clock in the sun and so on? And Jodorowsky understood that, okay, if he now says no, then he outs himself as not creative, and if he says yes, then he outs himself as pretentious and so on. And then he said, no, I've never found a clock in the sun, but I lost a few. And then Dali was impressed and said, okay, we can talk now about my $1,000 a minute and so on.
And yeah, obviously the film was way too expensive. Production shut down eventually, and all those creatives that worked on it, or a lot of them, went on to have quite elaborate and famous careers actually, as we talked about Alien, but also some of them were working on Blade Runner and other important films that came out in the following decades. So it's an interesting story, yeah.
And of course, I think that's also something to regard. He wanted to have like a original score by Pink Floyd. It just gets cooler
Amongst
and
others,
cooler
yeah.
The more you think about it. It would absolutely be the most crazy and insane shit you could ever imagine.
It's really one of those big what ifs of film history.
I mean, scientists have to invent some technology to travel into parallel universes just to watch this movie in one of them.
Definitely. Yeah.
So what else is there to say?
I have another question for you.
Okay.
Because The Holy Mountain was the first and so far only Jodorowsky film that I've watched. You have seen a couple, I think, and I want to ask you where you would rank The Holy Mountain amongst them. Do you think it's his best by far, or is it like in the middle of the road? How are his other films in comparison?
Yes. I think it is his best movie, yes, and it is widely regarded as his magnum opus, and quite correctly, because Dune is not a thing, really. But, I mean, his three best regarded movies are definitely, I think, The Holy Mountain, then El Topo, which is an acid western, so there are cowboys and it's a Jodorowsky movie. And then I would say Santa Sangre is also absolutely amazing. That's like, I think Roger Ebert even said this, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, that it's like a remake of Psycho directed by Louis Buñuel, and I think he's even underplaying it. It's much more insane than that, but absolutely beautiful. Santa Sangre, you have to watch it. You all have to watch it, including you, Tom. There's even a scene that you will love so much where the main character is like watching The Invisible Man, like this black and white movie, and like in the background, seriously, in the background, the movie is running. There are movie posters of the Invisible Man on the wall, and the main character is dressed up as the Invisible Man with like bandages over his face, and he's trying and he's working on his elixirs to really get invisible and so on.
That does sound like something I would do.
Yeah, and it's all like a metaphor, of course, of wanting to be invisible and all this kind of shit, but the way Jodorowsky just utilizes it just jumps out at you. But I would say, why is The Holy Mountain the best of his movies? Because it's the purest vision of his kind of poetry. And that's, I think, what it all boils down to. It's not really the acting or anything else, but it's just those moments in The Holy Mountain that are so sublime and so majestic and really beautiful. For example, when some children get shot and so on, of course, in the Jodorowsky universe, we don't really see this in any realistic way, but we then have just Tom, something came up on your computer. Please take a look while I continue.
I see it.
While I continue talking about this. Then we see like a slow motion shot of a dead child lying on the ground, and out of the bullet hole there's no blood, but little birds start to fly out of this bullet hole, and it's just like the most crazy and insane image. And that's really the thing, the way he's able to translate realistic and very traumatic things into this kind of visual poetry is very, very impressive. For example, there are a bunch of prostitutes who are coming out of church with an ape, and then there's a really small prostitute girl. She's like, I don't know, like 10 or something, and then like an old Chinese man is like taking her hand, and without a word spoken, he just takes her hand, and you have the close-up of this old Chinese guy and the hand of this little child. And then, of course, as a prostitute, this Chinese man is now going to pay her. But instead of just giving her money, which would be disturbing enough, he takes out one of his eyeballs. And this and this is like real. I mean, he has like this glass eye, and he's just pulling it out of his head, putting it in the hand of the child, and then closing the hand of the child. And this is utterly disturbing. And really at the same time, it's so otherworldly insane that you cannot take your eyes off it. And it's the whole metaphor is for the sexual act itself. So it's not just instead of showing a pornographic or a sentimental scene of, I don't know, child rape or anything like that, Jodorowsky finds this insanely creative visual metaphors for it. And so the audience is shocked at the same time, but also completely overwhelmed by the creativity and beauty of all of it. And make no mistake, this movie is really disturbing. And no minute goes by without some absolutely insane and creative stuff. I mean, this movie, I have heard that Jodorowsky has taken and has given his actors like psychedelic substances like mushrooms and so on. But this movie, and Jodorowsky describes, these are Jodorowsky's words, I think, that he uses himself, is not like a film made on drugs, but it is like a drug in the sense that you watch it and you get into the headspace of someone who is doing psychedelics or who is on a trip and so on. And I think that's quite an accurate description, because this really opens your mind, because seriously every minute some crazy and interesting idea is taking place. We could talk hours and hours and hours about it.
But we already hit the 30-minute marks of our episode.
So maybe the final statement, maybe Tom, you begin with your final statement.
Alright, so as I already said, I really enjoyed this film, and what really elevates it from just a pretty good, interesting time to a great out of work to me personally is that it's in some sense truly inspiring. Like, I caught myself almost not paying attention to the film at times because I was having or coming up with new ideas and thoughts, and that's what happens fairly often when I watch truly great films, that they inspire me to do my own work. So I'll just leave you with that, I think.
Yes, absolutely inspiring stuff. It's also quite interesting for theologians and philosophers and art historians and experts in aesthetics and so on. So yes, absolute recommendation for this masterpiece of cinema history. It's a truly must-see for cinephiles, and I don't recommend it to people who don't like nudity.